Have you ever been in an argument and felt like the other person wasn't just wrong, but that their belief was, I don't know, a kind of betrayal of the truth itself? It's a really powerful feeling, right? Well, today we're diving into a text that explores that very mystery. Why do we feel so personally responsible for what we believe? Okay, so let's start with a really important distinction. On one side, you have an error. That's simple. It's a mistake, a deviation from fact. But on the other side, you have this feeling of betrayal. The argument we're looking at says this isn't just you being dramatic. It's the feeling of breaking a rule, of going against what knowledge requires from you. And that feeling of requirement is what we're going to unpack. Believe it or not, this feeling of being accountable actually has a name in philosophy. It's called epistemic normativity. That's a fancy way of saying there are oughts when it comes to belief. It's not just about what is true, but what we feel we ought to believe. It's this idea that we're somehow answerable for our beliefs, and understanding this is the key to the whole thing. And this quote from our source just nails it. A fact can just kind of sit there, right? But an obligation, that's totally different. As it says here, it obligates. It makes a claim on you, personally. And suddenly, a simple fact is transformed into a responsibility. So the billion-dollar question is, where does that feeling of obligation even come from? Well, to answer that, the text builds its case like a detective following a chain of clues. The idea is that if we take our own feelings about truth seriously, each link in this logical chain just naturally pulls us toward the next one, and it reveals something pretty profound. So here's the roadmap for the whole argument. It flows through 3 simple-sounding steps. First, that feeling of ought implies that we're responsible. Second, for that responsibility to even mean anything, it has to be addressable. It has to be directed at someone. And third, for something to be addressed to you, it requires a will. Let's break down each one. Okay, step 1, connecting ought to responsibility. Think of it like this. You can mess up a calculation. You can deviate from a structure. That's an error. But you can only betray a someone. You betray a person or a trust you have with a person. The argument here is that our deep obligation to truth feels a lot more like that. Personal, like there's a someone on the other end who can be betrayed. Which leads us right to the next link in the chain. If we're responsible, then who exactly are we responsible to? I mean, a demand has to be directed at you to have any real power, doesn't it? Imagine a law written down in a book in a completely empty universe. Is it really a law? It can't hold anyone responsible because there's no one there making the claim. This idea is called addressability. So, addressability means that responsibility isn't some abstract thing like a computer program failing. It's personal. It's a relationship. It means you owe an answer to someone. You fail a claim that's been made on you. And without that addressee, the one you're responsible to, any so-called demand for truth is just an empty concept. And this brings us to the final, crucial link in the chain, will. You see, for something to actually address you, it has to have intention. A structure, like gravity, can cause an effect. An apple falls. But only a will can make a demand. Gravity can't demand that the apple fall. It just causes it to. The argument is that only something with intention, a will, can truly require something of you. This quote just captures the whole idea perfectly. In a world of only impersonal forces, there's just stuff happening, causes and effects. The whole concept of you, a subject who can be held responsible, just kind of disappears. Responsibility needs that personal dimension, that intention, that a simple structure just can't have. Okay, so you might be thinking, hang on a second, and let's tackle the biggest objection to this whole idea right now. What if we're not responsible to a person? What if we're just responsible to some big abstract principle, like truth with a capital T or reason? This table really lays out the limits of an impersonal principle. Look at what a principle can do. Sure, it can describe order. It can map out what's consistent and what isn't. But now look at what it can't do. It can't address you. It can't hold you responsible. A principle can show you that A and not A is a contradiction, but it can't point a finger and say, hey, you owe me consistency. A principle just is. It doesn't demand. And that's the bottom line right there. Violating some abstract principle makes you inconsistent. That's a state of being, a logical fact, but it doesn't by itself make you responsible. An unaddressed demand isn't really a demand at all. It's just a description of a system that you happen to be out of step with. And it all comes down to this. This is the ultimate takeaway. Responsibility is personal. It hinges on that one tiny powerful word, you. And the argument is that an impersonal structure, no matter how grand or fundamental, can't speak that word. It can't single you out. Only a will can. So, after following this logical path, from our feeling of ought to responsibility to addressability and finally to will, we arrive at a pretty remarkable conclusion. It kind of forces us to rethink what the source of truth itself must be like if our own deepest feelings about it are going to make any sense. So, the conclusion is this. If we really are responsible for our beliefs, then the ultimate source of that responsibility can't be some cold, impersonal system. It has to be something that can obligate us, that can relate to us, that can address us. In short, the argument concludes the ground of truth has to be more like a someone than a something. Now, it is absolutely essential to be clear about this next part. The source text is very careful to say this is not a proof for the existence of God. That's not what this is about. It's a philosophical argument about what must be true about the nature of reality itself for our experience of responsibility to be coherent. So what is it arguing then? It's demonstrating that an impersonal absolute, some cosmic principle, can explain logic just fine. It can explain consistency, but it can't explain why you owe truth anything. For that feeling of personal accountability to make sense, well, the ground of truth itself has to be personal. And so we're left with this final, really provocative question. The argument doesn't answer it for us. It just follows the logic where it leads and says, if our deepest sense of responsibility for truth is real, then the ultimate ground of reality must be personal. And if that's true, well, that just raises an even bigger question, doesn't it? Has it spoken?